All right, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to the No Level Cap podcast. I'm Sage Ashford. This is the No Level Cap crew. We bring you all the anime, all the gaming, and none of the bullshit. This is episode 9 in the books. Let's go. But before we start, I just want to remind you that we are on Spotify. If you prefer the video version, of course, we are on YouTube as well. You can check out the bite-sized version of our podcast on TikTok in case your attention span is all fucked up like mine is. So I did want to kick it off. Like last week, we talked about acquisitions, and literally before the next day, that night that we recorded the podcast, because we record typically on a Saturday and it goes up on Monday. The night that it was scheduled to go, right before it was scheduled to go up, something new came through, and I'm gonna read you a news report so we can get some opinions from everybody. It's from me, actually. I wrote this news report.
Hey, that's self promo.
Yes, sir. This is for me over at Comic-Con. The Embracer Group has slowly become one of the largest gaming publishing studios in the world after acquiring major and minor studios around the globe. Now Embracer has taken their next step by announcing they've acquired the Western development arm of Square Enix in a deal totaling $300 million. Yep, $300 million. This deal will see Embracer acquire Crystal Dynamics, Eidos Montreal, and Square Enix Montreal, along with a host of IPs that includes Tomb Raider, Deus Ex, Thief, Legacy of Kain, and more than 50 other back catalog IPs. This isn't really a surprise. Square Enix has noted disappointment with the performances of their Western games going back to the early 2010s. In 2013, they mentioned Tomb Raider failed to meet their expectations because it only sold 3.4 million copies. Marvel's Avengers was also notably considered to be a disappointment, as was Marvel's Guardians of the Galaxy, which supposedly only sold 1.5 million. So now we're looking at this. As far as we know, right now, they sold, supposedly they've been looking for a buyer for a while now, and Embracer just came along and was like, bet, we was looking for more studios to gobble up anyway. What we know is that Crystal Dynamics talked about it that night. It was 1:35 a.m. in the morning. They were like, a new chapter in our story begins as we announce a plan to join the Embracer Group family. Embracer Group will help propel us to great new heights as we continue to deliver exciting experiences from our beloved portfolio of franchises and original concepts and IPs developed with partners. If you were wondering, we don't know what's going to happen with Marvel's Avengers. We don't know what's going to happen with Guardians of the Galaxy. They did do a little press conference type thing that morning. They talked about how they do own the rights to Marvel's Avengers and Guardians of the Galaxy, but they would need permission from Marvel to keep working on them. Other than that, they were also working with Initiative on Perfect Dark. Initiative was very quick to say, yeah, we're working with them as well. They put out a tweet at 2:03 a.m. that morning. So it's already in the works like that. The only thing that's changed that we know of is that they're no longer owned by Square. And I did want to get some opinions. I wanted to see what y'all think. We had a discussion about acquisitions, and then immediately a massive acquisition happened. It was kind of scary. I'm like, holy shit, I thought we were going to slow down after some of the big news, but I guess not. Rakeem, what do you think?
I want to say the first thing that came to my mind was, I guess the Western invasion by Square Enix is over.
Yes.
When they first acquired all those studios, where they were focusing more on Western content, it was around 2010, 2011, between 2011, 2013. I was kind of excited because I think we all know that Final Fantasy is, and some of the other projects, except Dragon Quest, which is really, really big in Japan, especially, have a broad range of audience. So I guess as they felt they started appealing to the West before, and with their other IPs, they wanted even more IPs to kind of branch to the West because that's where the big market was. It's a little bittersweet because I feel like the games that came out of that era, the Tomb Raider reboots, Deus Ex, those IPs especially, I really like those games. Deus Ex, Human Revolution was one of my favorite video games on PS3. I wholeheartedly love the cyberpunk aspects of it. I love the protagonist. I love the world. It's very different from everything else. It combines stealth elements and RPG elements, some detective stuff. Very different, very fun, great IP. And even with the Tomb Raider reboot, I never was a Tomb Raider guy outside of maybe seeing the movies. And the reboot got me really invested in Lara Croft's story and the character. And to this day, I played the first game in Rise. I never got around to getting Shadow. I own it. I haven't played it yet. So the quality of the games to me were still pretty decent, outside of some of some of those original IPs. Around the time when Marvel came, even though we know they had some issues with the sales for Tomb Raider and the second Deus Ex, first Deus Ex actually did very well. Around the time that Marvel came and they swapped over those studios, you could already feel there was a heavier weight of expectation for those studios to deliver, because at that time, Marvel was pretty much, in-game. I think around the time like in-game had happened already. Marvel Studios, like Marvel was a heavy hitter in the industry. So they knew those games doing well would probably, kind of cultivate, even more Western expansion to the audience. And when those games underperformed, Marvel's Avengers and Guardians of the Galaxy, respectively, although we've heard Guardians of the Galaxy is a pretty good game as well, I think we all knew something was going to happen. I didn't think this was going to happen where they sold off their IPs. But I was afraid, like, man, something this massive loss, could a studio get caught out? Could people lose their jobs? Ultimately, even though it's kind of bittersweet to me, I think it might be a positive thing. Because now that they're working with Embracer Group, and me and Sage have discussed this before, Embracer Group is basically like a conglomerate that is eating up IPs in the background very quietly, but they kind of leave them to be autonomous and do their own thing. So I'm actually kind of excited to see what Crystal Dynamics would do. They've already announced they're making a new Tomb Raider game, I believe, a few months ago.
Yeah, they announced that at the Unreal Engine 5 demo. That was like one of the big announcement coming out of that.
Yeah, I kind of am happy, like they're able to work on their IPs that they love. I don't know if it'll be a new Deus Ex or Eidos Montreal work on something else without that weight of Square Enix's expectations, which ultimately are like very unrealistic. We remember the game Sleeping Dogs was a great game, and because of a lot of different factors, a failed sequel, an online component, the expectations of sales, that IP never really got to live up to its full, ability. Like it never got to reach the heights it should have been to, because it was very quality, good IP. I don't know if they sold that IP as well.
Yes.
Thank God. But
at least I'm not sure. Like they said they sold 50 different IP, and I just figured that Sleeping Dogs is a part of that. I mean, I don't know what else I'm sure they sold Gex. Yes, they did own Gex.
Oh yeah. I saw the memes online about Gex, like, oh my God, you only got 300 million for Gex? That's a steal. My goodness, Gex, the legend. Oh my goodness. But yeah, getting back to it, I'm actually kind of excited because now we'll get to see what these studios get to do when they're unbothered a bit. I mean, I'm sure Embracer Group still has things they need them people to hit, a certain timeline and stuff like that. But it seems like they're a little less,
controlling
on their backs, like Square Enix is about those sales targets for specific things. We'll see how that works out. I'm excited personally. Square, in this, it seems they're going to really double down the IPs they currently own or new IPs they're creating, which I'm fine with too, because I mean those are the franchises I grew up with and loved Square for. So if they double their efforts there, as we know, Final Fantasy 14 is killing it right now. So that's worked out for them. I have high hopes of Final Fantasy 16. Kingdom Hearts 4 got announced, so they got plenty of games and IPs coming down, down the timeline. So they'll be fine as far as IPs and games. Hopefully, it works out for both parties separately, but ultimately, I'm going to be optimistic about this acquisition.
I think that's a good stance to take, at least until we see what comes out of them. And I mean, like this, much like when Terrence was talking about what Microsoft has been doing, you probably won't see the full fruits of this until like the end of the decade. It'll take years. Games just take so long to develop. If like they said, Tomb Raider was starting development right now. So like, how long would that possibly, like a new Tomb Raider, could that take? 4 or 5 years? 2027 before we saw a release. Yeah. So like that's a long time. Like we'll be well into the 2020s by the time we see just that one IP. Now, one thing I do want to note, I forgot to mention this when I was reading off my report. Square Enix also released a press release of their own. They mentioned they plan to use additional funds to launch new businesses and fields, including blockchain, AI, and the cloud. Hooray! Back to blockchain. Also, Rakeem mentioned the IPs that Square was keeping, like they were going to work on their own IPs, double down on like Japanese games and stuff like that. Not entirely. They were keeping 3 specific IPs that they've been just licensing out to Western studios. They didn't have their own Western studios working on them. They're keeping Just Cause, which I mean,
Okay, that makes
Just
sense.
Cause always does pretty well.
Makes sense.
They're keeping Outriders for some reason.
Oh, well,
Even though
I wish we had Devin for that.
I do wish we had Devin. Outriders to date, Outriders was supposed to like, of course, developers, they get like bonuses based on like how the game performs, how it's sold, how it reviewed, all that stuff. They got nothing because the condition for them to get a bonus was for them to recoup the cost of development, and it hasn't. They have yet to recoup cost of development, and we're like months out, almost a year out now. Rakeem, you bought it. When did that game come out?
Ooh, I'm gonna say fall of last year. I could be wrong.
So it's been 3 to 6. It's been somewhere like 6 to 8 months at this point.
I'm not gonna lie to you, man. After Outriders crashed on me 4 times in an hour and disconnected multiple times within 2 hours, I kind of just forgot that game existed and acted like I didn't buy
it. Hey, yo,
Outriders is more like I rode out.
I did.
But it's actually been a year. The game came out on April Fool's last year.
That's what it was, April Fool's.
And everybody that bought it, never mind. And the other IP that they kept was Life is Strange, which I mean I respect. Life is Strange does very well for them in terms of like critical reception. It's always getting awards for like how well written the stories are. And I mean, like I played Life is Strange True Colors and I fell in love with it, and I fell in love with Alex. So like I'm glad they're keeping it around. Hopefully Deck 9 is already at work on another Life is Strange that's the same scale or even larger, because I could have stayed in that world forever. But yeah, overall, like they definitely got rid of like all their other IP, like the anything that Crystal Dynamics had, anything that that Eidos Montreal was using, they just kind of was like, we don't want any of this anymore. I assume that Sleeping Dogs also went along with it. Will, how do you feel about Square Enix getting rid of their Western arm?
Well, now knowing that Embrace is not, gonna be like, if you ain't got 2 million copies sold by the end of the week, I'm whooping your ass. As long as they ain't like, as soon as I hear they ain't like that, it sounds like we could be in good hands here with a few things kind of coming out. A lot of things, and then I hear about my homie Gexter Gecko. I ain't heard about him in God knows how long.
I don't think Gex is gonna get a game, but he might get a re-release. He might get a re-release.
If they acknowledge him in any little capacity, I'm okay with that. I love Deep Cover Gecko. That was my shit. So I'm okay with all of this, honestly. And I feel like Keem kind of hit the nail on the head for a lot of things. I'm just gonna kind of look forward and see what happens. I don't have much of an opinion on it, but knowing what's out there for the Western Division, knowing Tomb Raider's getting something new, and I'm just like, maybe I got something to smile about in the future. Maybe I can't just be the negative Nancy all day long, So I look forward to it, then. I'll look forward.
Appreciate that. Like, it's good to have positivity. I know as gamers, a lot of times we just immediately sink to like, what's the worst that can possibly happen, and it don't always have to be like that. Sometimes things can turn out for the better. Terrence, how do you feel?
So it seems like Square is kind of going through their Capcom phase in a sense. Not full on Capcom. I say Capcom in regards to how Capcom was during the PS3 360 generation, where it seemed like they had expectations for certain IPs to just blow it out of the park and just sell millions upon millions of copies, and it didn't happen. And well, Capcom had to go back to the drawing board, and it feels like that's kind of like what Square is doing in terms of just selling off all these IPs, where it's like they didn't meet the whatever wild expectations they had, so they're like, well, we're better off without them, so we'll just get rid of them and focus on our own thing. Which, if they were solely focusing on kind of like their own IPs and the other ones they didn't sell off, that would be fine. But they're going to take this money and put it into blockchain, NFTs, and other stuff that's just like, why? What are you doing? Like, what do you get out of this? Like, you have to see the trend for this, that it's not going to work. Like, what? What's up, Rocky? Oh, both of you. Both of you got something to go for it.
The main thing I was going to mention is like after the announcement that Square was investing in, I think it was like the very next day or 2 days later, the market for NFTs freaking crashed.
Yes.
Like shortly after. It was hilarious.
Now, before Terrence goes on, I will say that's what they wanted. They wanted to put money in the blockchain, but they're not idiots. So, like, if the NFT market is well and truly crashed, and smarter people than me will go investigate that and see if there's any potential for blockchain and NFTs and shit like that. Smarter people than me will check that out. If it's well and truly crashed, I mean, they just sold it. The sale hasn't really completed yet. They'll pull out. They'll just pull out and do something else. But I'll go ahead, Terrence.
Were you gonna say something, Will?
Honestly, Keem said exactly what I was thinking too about the whole market crashing. I'm like, the market didn't crash, but I've been hearing little bits here and there about how this whole blockchain NFT thing is kind of gotten to the point where it, like, the pricing of it is so astronomically out there that it's only for those people who are like big money. They can afford to get that mess. It's just other regular people can't get it. But I also think this is the stubbornness of a Japanese man wanting to get something that shouldn't be in. It's been him being hard-headed. That's what I feel, and it's gonna bite him in his ass sooner or later. That's what I feel.
You talking about Square Enix's president?
Yes, it's gonna bite him hard, and he gonna hate it.
Yeah, but yeah, it just seems like they're going through their Capcom phase where they want to, these IPs to do these big numbers, but they need to kind of reel it in and have better expectations. And hopefully they'll have them for their games going forward. Probably not, but we'll see. But at least now that they don't have like these Western divisions, I guess Square could kind of go back to just being the Square that we kind of fell in love with, or at least like the IPs that we really know from Square. Because for the past, like, I guess really like the past decade, Square hasn't been like the traditional Square. They've been Square. It's kind of like Square Japan. Then you have your Square West, where you had your Tomb Raider, you had your Deus Ex, and you had a bunch of other IPs that they were working on. And now that those are gone, I guess we could just see Square as just Japanese Square now. So I don't really have a strong opinion one way or the other. If they're not, I guess my opinion would be stronger if it was definite that they were going to go into like the blockchain stuff, NFTs and whatnot. Then I'd be like, this is a stupid decision. Not the selling of the IPs, but using the money from that sale to do this instead of putting that money into like making your games better, or like better, pay everyone better or something like that. But anyway, yeah, this is one of the things where we're just going to see how it plays out. I mean, hopefully this decision will result in better games from Square, just better quality. But yeah, that's really all I have on it. I don't really have an opinion one way or the other. I could just hope that Square does the right thing because of all this not acquisition, but with this money, they use it for the right reasons instead of putting it into something that's not going to work out in the long run.
I mean, for me, I guess every chance Square got, they threw the Western Division under the bus. Like, every chance. Like, they never took an opportunity. They never missed an opportunity where they could go, can we shit on the Western Division today? And they would find a way. They'd be like, yep, we found a new way. Like, when I read the report, and it's like, yeah, Tomb Raider sold 3.4 million copies, and they were like, yeah, this is a disappointment. It's like, okay. Rise of the Tomb Raider, I think they were kind of disappointed in that. I'm like, well, that's y'all's fault. You did an exclusive with Xbox at a time where PlayStation 4 was like the #1 platform, so I don't feel sorry for you. Shadow the Tomb Raider, they dropped that in between like multiple massive releases, in between Spider-Man, Red Dead, and Assassin's Creed Odyssey. Of course, you got crushed. I don't feel sorry for you. Marvel's Avengers, it trended online. For fuck's sake. Like, the second it trended online and they was like, what in the hell is this? Like, when that shit was revealed at E3 in 2019, it trended online. It was like the game that everybody was waiting on the most right after Cyberpunk 2027 or 2077. And the second people saw it, they were like, what is this shit? Why does it look like this? Everybody hated how it looked. That was your sign to delay that game by at least 2 years, 2-3 years, to like change the look of it, to like make sure it was a more content complete game. And they didn't do none of that. So like when that game released and it came in hot, and if I don't know if y'all remember this, it came out September 2020. Yeah. They initially planned for it to release in May of 2020. I can only imagine that motherfucker probably would have made your PS4 smoke.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. It would have been horrible. And so like, I just don't know what they expected from that project. And as far as Guardians of the Galaxy goes, people saw how it looked similar to Marvel's Avengers and they just checked out. All of them. They were like, this is probably going to suck just like the other one. Because at first everybody thought it was going to be like some games as a service bullshit. and they didn't like it. They like were, oh well, I'm not gonna play this, and it turned out to be like a single player story, just a straightforward action game, and with like a solid, really well told story with really likable, lovable characters, and like you ruined that. Like you ruined the chance of that being a success. And between the two of them, by the way, just so we're clear about how much money they lost doing business with Marvel, Marvel's not entirely to blame for this. This is mostly just Square. But like, just so we're clear about how much money they burned on the Marvel licenses, they lost $200 million that they never recouped. So like, just selling these, like that shows you how desperate they were to get rid of these studios. They sold them for $300 million. That's not really a profit. Like you got to get out the hole. You got to dig your way outside of a $200 million hole, and then they gave you, I guess, $100 million profit. Sort of. That's not really how profit works in a business, but y'all get what I'm saying. Like you have to recoup all this fucking money that you lost, and now you just trying to like, oh, maybe we can get something back for this. Now, to be fair, I think they initially bought Eidos Montreal for like 83 million or something like that. And it's not as if they didn't get something out of it. Deus Ex, I remember reading, kind of saved Square Enix one year. Like when the year Square Enix released Deus Ex Human Revolution, that shit saved them because they were not in a good position. And it's a testament to how badly they managed to fuck up over the next decade, that everything that they released was like, oh man, this is disappointing. Oh man, we expected better. We expected higher sales. And I do see where Terrence is coming from as far as the similarities to Capcom, in that I remember Resident Evil 5 or 6, was it 6? That sold like 6 million copies, and they were like, yeah, this is kind of disappointing. And I'm like, if you need more than 6 million copies for it to like hit the level of success you're looking for, you have fucked up. It's Resident Evil. It ain't Skyrim. It ain't Grand Theft Auto. You shouldn't have sunk no hundreds of millions of dollars into this so that when it sells 6 million, you're like, oh, I can't believe.
Capcom also had a bunch of other like weird IPs that they wanted to do well, like Dark Void and Bionic Command, like the reboot for Bionic Commando.
Yeah.
It's like you wanted those to like sell out the wazoo. Are you mad? So
Dark Void was new at the time, and Bionic Commando is like literally something from like the 80s on the Nintendo.
Yeah,
in the
Like
arcade.
Captain Commando.
It is really funny that this is the second time we've talked about Dark Void between me
We
and
talked
Keith.
about it before.
We
Yeah.
just did this weekend.
Bro, I see it everywhere, and I can't stand seeing it. I'm like, I'm not buying this game.
it's being sold for like
getting
what,
it.
like $6.99?
Man, that game's selling for like $2 every time I see it.
Probably still too
That
much, to be
bad.
honest with you. But yeah, I mean, like that's just it's unsurprising. Hopefully, this does give Square the opportunity to go back to its roots a little bit. Right now, we're already seeing them like basically make new installments of like very old IP Front Mission, well, remakes of Front Mission. A new installment of Star Ocean, a new installment of Mana is confirmed to be coming. A new installment of Saga is confirmed to be coming. Valkyrie Profile. So like maybe we will see them getting a little bit better over the next couple of years. And then at the same time, you also have Embracer Group. Its thing is getting games that are IPs that are old and trying to make something new out of them at a reasonable cost, reasonable budget, and getting that out and seeing if it can be a success. They're doing it with Jagged Alliance, which is an ancient IP it's getting a sequel. Jagged Alliance 3 is coming out, I think, either this year or next year. Outcast, I believe it's called. Yeah, I believe it's Outcast. It's getting a sequel. It's like a decade, like the original game came out in 1999. And so like this is like 2 decades later, and they're like, we don't care. We're gonna release something. Hopefully y'all get a new Deus Ex. Hopefully you get a new Thief. I feel like those IPs both could, if they're priced at a reasonable amount, I mean, if they're budgeted at a reasonable level and they come out as like AA level games, not super high budgeted games, they can do very well for themselves and carve out a niche. So like, we'll see. As somebody that plays Avengers, I feel like that game is dead for the most part. Not as dead as Babylon's Fall, but still pretty fucking dead. Even out like, at best you might get, yeah, exactly. Well, it's got one fucking player on Steam, or it had one player on Steam.
He holding it down for the whole game. One man.
It's no
one
way.
man can have all that power.
First off, they ruined Steam charts because it was like they've got one concurrent player, and I'm like, that's not how concurrent works. So you've already gone wrong. But like, yeah, I think Avengers is dead. Maybe you finish out the rest of the DLC, something coming out over the course of like the remainder of this year, probably the start of next, and then you wrap that on up. Guardians, probably a dead IP. I think that if you release the Guardians 2, it would review better and sell better. Like I think the reviews would be better just because it'd be a more polished experience. You get your second time around, and I think it would sell better because of the word of mouth. So I think it all around it would do better. One quick thing I want to ask before we move on to the main topic of the show. The rumor is, and this is not a rumor without cause. Well, kind of. We've talked. There are a few people that are insiders in the industry that are actual reporters and not just like idiots with a Twitter account that have said that the reason that what's going to happen very shortly is Sony buying Square Enix, and this was part of like the thing. Like they were selling off their Western division to kind of slim up and trim down so Sony can buy Square Enix. So I'm gonna ask,
so it's not like a huge. Oh, okay. I think I get it.
so I'm gonna ask two questions back to back. You can answer them both. One, how do you feel about it? Two, do you think that's actually gonna happen? Will, you seem like you're most excited to answer. So what's up?
I was most excited to answer because I was trying to stop you before you said it. I was like, if you're about to say what I think you're about to say, I know where you're headed with this. And it was about Sony possibly getting Square Enix. Now, to answer your question, am I excited about it? I'm 70, not 30, yes. The reason why I'm not too excited about it is because what someone said on Twitter, I saw, they was like, if Sony so much as get their hands on Square Enix, you can kiss Mana, Saga, Bravely, anything in the underlying trilogy, such as Octopath and Triangle Strategy. You can kiss a lot of that goodbye if they get it. So a lot of those B titles, gone. If they get them, you're going to see Final Fantasy, Kingdom Hearts, and what
Dragon
else?
Quest.
Dragon Quest. There you go. We're going to see those three. The rest of them, kaput. And I'm just like, I'm not okay with that, because them other titles that Square got a big legacy and a great fan base behind a lot of them. You get rid of those, you're basically cutting like a huge chunk of like a lot of your buyers out if you do that, I feel. At least for me. So, and I ain't got nothing against Final Fantasy, Kingdom Hearts, or Dragon Quest. All great things, right? But it's just, I think they shouldn't do it. Will it happen? I can't say, because it feels like it's just up in the air, like, oh, this is probably gonna happen. But I'm just kind of sitting here with my hands folded, waiting. So we gonna see what comes of it. If it happens, then I guess I gotta brace myself for something that I may not like.
All right, fair enough. I was actually gonna go down the same path as Will, like what Will said he saw on Twitter. I was gonna say some of the same stuff. I'm gonna come back around to that in just a second. Rakeem, how do you feel? Do you think that it can be like? Do you think this is gonna happen, and do you think it's a good thing?
I think it can happen. I think at this point, after all we mentioned in our last podcast, by the way, check it out. We talked about acquisitions. At this point, anything when Bethesda got acquired, once Activision Blizzard got acquired, to me, anything's on the table now. I'm not excited. How to done? Shout out. I'm not excited, mainly because I'm tired of seeing this. It feels like, too, like you guys mentioned, Square's mid-division picked up a lot of momentum, like with Bravely Default, Octopath, and Triangle Strategy. And that connection with, and like the games that working with Nintendo and PC, they're doing pretty well. On top of that, it feels kind of, I don't know, it almost feels unnecessary at this point, although we know like games are really expensive to make. And obviously, they did lose a lot of money with Marvel, so this could be kind of them a way to kind of save themselves getting out the red from that situation, which that makes sense from a business standpoint. But as a fan, it just feels kind of cheap. On that hand, I'm not very excited about that. But also, I kind of understand to a degree because I've always felt like, to me anyway, Square in the last decade felt like it was kind of leaning towards PlayStation a little more. Anywhere like Sony's Japanese studio associated with Sony, it makes sense to be associated with that kind of console. That legacy, they've been with them since the beginning, essentially, as far as their console. But yeah, I'm not ultimately excited. Yes, I believe it can happen because at this point, anything can be acquired. Once Activision got bought, I think anything can be acquired. Nobody's off limits. I don't want to see that. I will bring up another thing as well, though. If you guys have noticed in the media, for some of these acquisitions, these big acquisitions that are happening, some of them are starting to become investigated for certain legal issues and problems like that. So if this trend continues, and I wonder if like the investigations are picking up, if any of these catch steam and somebody loses some money out of this or gets hit by the government for some of these situations? Will some of these acquisitions slow down? That's something I'm wondering out of this. That's all I think about it.
That's a very good point, and I can't believe I forgot to bring it up. I will say this, as far as the investigations, I don't think that those are going to go anywhere, but I do think that if the FTC makes enough problems for all these publishers trying to buy them, that they might slow down just based off that alone. There is a theory, I don't know how true this is, or well, it's a theory, I don't know if it's bullshit or if it's like a good theory, that the reason why Microsoft didn't buy those studios, especially since they're about to work with Crystal Dynamics, is because they're already buying Activision and they don't want to invite any more scrutiny and criticism. They were like, all right, well, Activision is all we can get right now. We're just going to have to like lay low until that goes through, and then maybe we can start buying studios again. And so like they're kind of waiting things out. All right, Terrence, it's you're up, man. Like, what do you think? Do you think it is a good thing, and do you think it could actually happen?
Well, Rakeem is such a good analyst that he pointed out the thing that I was going to bring up is that, yeah, the FTC kind of looking into this stuff makes me wonder, like when you mentioned the whole fact that they sold off the IPs to potentially look good enough for Sony to buy without having it be too big, that makes sense. And as far as Sony trying to buy Square, is that a good thing in my opinion? Kind of like what Will said. I mean, both of you really already hit on the points that I was going to hit on, or you probably hit on them better than I would have. But yeah, I don't know. I don't think that it's really a good thing if Sony chooses to only use the high profile IPs that Square is known for and throw away everything else, because we don't need that to happen. Like, Square has so much potential. They have so many IPs. Heck, even now, even with everything that they're trying to resurrect, there's still so many IPs that Square has that they could still do something with. And if they get acquired by Sony, yeah, you could pretty much kiss all that goodbye. Like Sony really wants the blockbuster titles. They don't really want any like indie level stuff. So you wouldn't get anything like what's it called? Trials of Mana? Is that what it's called?
Yeah.
Like, you wouldn't get anything more like that. You wouldn't get any little side stuff like Octopath Traveler. You wouldn't. You could kiss all that goodbye. What'd you say, Will?
I said no romance and saga, none of that stuff. All of it be just gone.
Star Ocean.
Yeah, like those. Star Ocean. You could kiss like all those like what do you call them, like Sprite 2D 2.5D remakes. 2D. Yeah, HD2. You could kiss all those. You kiss all those remakes goodbye, because Sony probably wouldn't want anything to do with that. So, if Sony were to go down that path, I would say no. It's not a good idea for them to acquire Square. But if they didn't, I'm just gonna say no. It's not a good idea, because I just don't think Sony would do it the right way. I just really don't. So. That's ultimately my answer. I think Will and Rakeem already hit on the points that I was going to make. Is that one, I could when you mentioned the whole thing about Square selling off the Western IPs to look more appealing for Sony and make the acquisition easier, that makes a lot of sense. And it's that kind of sneaky stuff is the reason why we have to keep an eye on these businesses, because they're always trying to pull a fast one, and we need to hold them accountable. Yeah, we need to hold them accountable in that regard. So I'm glad at least that this stuff is getting investigated, and hopefully that will kind of slow down these acquisitions a little bit. I don't think it's going to stop them like what you said, Sage, but hopefully it means that maybe we won't see as many within maybe like the next couple of years, or at least until some of these acquisitions that are already happening go through. In regards to Sony buying Square, the potential of it, I hope it doesn't happen, just because I do want Square to remain independent. Them and Capcom, I really, since they're two of my favorite companies, they make some of my favorite games, I really want them to continue to be on their own and not be under a company like Sony, just because I could see so much damage coming from that.
So I'm going to go a little bit against y'all. I think that Octopath Traveler and Bravely Default, I think those would be safe. I think that Sony likes the appearance of caring about indie games and the appearance of caring about like the smaller titles. And that's like Studio Asano, such as it is, because it's not a proper studio, but like Studio Asano is the kind of shit that Sony really loves. It's the boutique studio that makes these like critically acclaimed games that the fans love, and they perform just well enough. What I think is dead is Star Ocean. Star Ocean didn't perform well on the PS3. Star Ocean did not perform well on the PS4. It didn't even review well on the PS4. Like it was just considered to be all around a bad game. I think games like the Mana series, I think the Saga series, because like my limited understanding of Square Enix is that all it takes for a new IP, for a new installment of an IP to get made is for like someone that works there that's high up enough to like vocally stand up for that IP and go, I want another one of those and I'm willing to work on it. And as long as they have that, unless the game is just like a critical crashing failure, you'll still get another one. Like as long as it does decent enough, like Star Ocean, I guess, because it was like the biggest problem with Star Ocean is that it was done on like a Star Ocean 5, excuse me. The biggest problem with Star Ocean 5 was that it was done on like a super fucking budget. And at a certain point, all it was is just a lot of backtracking. And that's what detracted from the game. And so like, I think games like those, Sony, if they bought Square, would be like, yeah, we don't need that. Well, we don't need another Saga game. Those things don't perform all that well. We don't need another, like they would look at the games that don't perform well and aren't like necessarily critically acclaimed, and they would get those the fuck out of here. Studio Asano would be the like, see, we still care about non-blockbuster games. That would be that. But the rest of them, out the fucking window. Like all that front mission remake shit, you would have never gotten that if Sony bought them. Like they don't care about none of that. Not unless they bought Square and was like, yeah, we're buying Square just to buy them, but like they're gonna retain all autonomy. Which, why? Like that's not how that typically works. So unless that were to happen, I think that you'd get Final Fantasy, you'd get Kingdom Hearts, you'd get Dragon Quest, and then you'd get whatever Studio Asano makes, and then all the rest of them out the fucking window, just immediately out the window. And so like, I think it would be a bad thing. I think that sucks. I'm super excited to see if Divine Force is any good. Like I'm that's one of my favorite IPs. Of the 3 IPs that I grew up with, that I was like 3 franchises that I grew up with that I really love. Lunar, which is dead. It was dead really when I got to it because it was only ever 2 games. Suikoden, which is dead because Konami sucks, and then Star Ocean. Those are my 3 favorite IPs growing up, and like of those 3, there's only one left that's still getting any attention. And so I would be really bummed out if all of a sudden we're never going to be a Star Ocean 6 or 7 or whatever. So like, I don't want to see this happen.
Do you all think that Nier, they would still keep that around?
Yes.
Automata did well enough that I believe they would.
Automata sold like upwards of 5 million. Like,
Automata did amazingly.
It does better. It sold better than Xenoblade, which everybody hypes up as like a big IP. It sells better than Fire Emblem, which everybody hypes up as a big IP for Nintendo. It sold extremely well, and it had like a really good critical reception. The fans loved it. That's the type of thing that would sell, that Sony would be like, yeah, we'll keep making that. It's along the lines of, it's like, not exactly this, but it's like the JRPG version of Ratchet. Like Ratchet ain't setting the world on fire sales wise, but it does well enough and people love it well enough that they keep making them. So it would be like that.
Okay.
And plus, I don't think they would want to bump heads with Yoko Taro on that game, because that man do not back down on anything regarding his series.
And they actually like that though. Like they like the auteur, like the genius director. They love that shit.
Yeah, so, that's kind of what I was thinking. Like, would they get rid of the more quirky stuff, or would they keep it? You know.
It depends. Like if there's like a strong creative director behind it, they probably would keep it. But as far as like, and I have seen people talk about like, oh, I don't think Sony would get rid of any of that stuff. And I'm like, you out your mind. Like the excuse is always like, oh, they kept Returnal. And I'm like, Returnal was like, specifically before Returnal, that studio used to make really small games that nobody played that performed really well. And Sony was like, that's cool, but we gonna need you to make some AAA versions of that shit. And so like you get Returnal instead of getting what did they do? Matterfall and some other game that they did. Resogun, I think that's them too.
Oh yeah, I played that.
Yeah, they used to do like twin stick shooters, but they were like really simplistic. They didn't have the story. They didn't have the graphics. They didn't have it's like bullet hell type shit. They didn't have the production quality that you would expect. And like Sony is big on production quality. So like even if they can pull out a budget version of a production quality game, that's what they're gonna do, and that's what they would demand of Square if they bought them, I feel. And so like I'm not too excited at the idea of them buying it. And then like as for whether or not I think it could happen, I'm I'm gonna say no because typically you don't hear about acquisitions in advance like that. Typically they come out largely because of insider trading, like the potential, like if too many people know about it, there's too much potential to like rig the market, and so like you're not supposed to know about those things ahead of time. So I'm gonna say no. However, the two people that reported on it, Jeff Grubb and Greg Miller, they're both like respected industry people. They're not just like guys who like hop on YouTube to stretch out a 2-minute video into 10 minutes so they can get some clicks. They're not those guys. They're like actual industry people. So they might have heard that from reputable sources. I can only hope that's not true. So we should switch to the big topic of the week.
Okay.
Everybody loves like a good anime, like something that you can really sink your teeth into. But the question is always, can it stick the landing? Can the show stick the landing, or is it gonna like you get midway through and there's nothing worse than getting midway through an anime you really love and it sucks? Some people might call this the Sunrise effect. Sunrise in the late 2000s had this problem where they would split their 50 episode shows into 2 seasons, and the first season would be fire and like crack and like something that the whole anime community was talking about, and then the second season was like, why'd you make this? Like, what happened to all the fire? Like, what happened to the flames? Like, you put the flames out. You got the fire extinguisher for the second half. What the hell happened? And so, like, I wanted to ask y'all about anime y'all thought fell off. Like, what anime do you feel like, man, this shit was cold, and then now it's cool. Now it's not cold. It's just cool. It's lukewarm. I don't like it no more. So, like, I'm gonna ask Terrence, like, what anime like did you think fell off, bro?
All right, so I'm gonna break this down a little bit. I have one big one, like an anime that is mainstream that most people who watch anime at least know of. I have two that are kind of like lesser known that I think I just want to bring up just because I can. Now I will say with this subject, we were talking about this before the podcast started in terms of like searching for anime like this. I think I've gone through more anime where it's not a matter it fell off, but it got to a point where I wanted to see more and I never saw more. It was like we left off, we got to like episode 12 of that season, and it was like, oh man, I can't wait for the next season. 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years later, ain't no other season, baby. No, but okay. The first anime I'm going to start off with, and I'm going to give a pretty in-depth explanation on it, is Sword Art Online. And here's why I picked this.
Do you need an explanation? Like, I'm not saying don't get it. I'm just saying I feel like everybody know, like, man, that shit fell the fuck off, bro. Like, what you mean? I don't care how popular that shit is. So
what I'm gonna say is this isn't gonna my talk on this isn't gonna be a shit on Sword Art Online kind of thing, because so many people have done that. I mean, throughout like the rats. No, but for like I remember like the mid 2010s, it was just everybody was just shitting on Sword Art and just giving their hot takes on how garbage it was and everything. I never thought that Sword Art was a bad series. I really enjoyed the first half. I guess that's where I'll start. I enjoyed the first half of Sword Art Online. The I always forget what. Well, I guess
the Ironclad arc.
Yeah, Ironclad arc. Yeah. I really enjoyed that arc until like it got to the latter part of it. Then it kind of started pulling some BS. But for the most part, I enjoyed that arc. I feel like that arc is definitive Sword Art Online. Then you get to the other half of the first season, and you no longer have the if I die in real life, if I die in the game, I die in real life aspect to it. And then you also have the weird kind of like cousin relationship thing going on there. It's like, I don't know about this. Okay, move past that. Go to the second season. Second season, we're going to Gun Gale Online. That season, it feel like it tried to recreate the magic of the Ironclad arc, but it really didn't. And it was fine. It wasn't mind blowing at all. Like they were trying to do something different, but it just, in my opinion, it was okay. It was average. And then the other part of that season, I actually, in my opinion, I know a lot of people I think have kind of like the reverse opinion. I actually think the second half of the second season, where it focuses on Asuna, I actually think that part is better, because it at least gives her more character development, and it's good character development too. Because it's character development without Kirito. I guess that's what I mean. Is that Kirito, he's not around that much throughout that part. It's really just her, and I forgot the other character that she was friends with during that part. It's been a while since I've seen Sword Art Online, so forgive me if I'm like forgetting names of certain stuff and whatnot. But that part, in my opinion, was better than the first part of season 2. Now, I will admit I have not seen Alicization, so I cannot comment on that. But I will say that
it's just got some of the same problems, like the same weird essay type shit that always comes up.
I was gonna mention that. It seems like the author for Sword Art has this weird hard on, I guess, for that sort of thing, because every single season he has to have, and I'm like, why are we doing this, man?
Great question.
But anyway, that's a whole other conversation. But yeah, I just feel like after the first half of Sword Art Online, it just wasn't the same. But I will say, I watched the Sword Art Online progressive movie last year, and it kind of rekindled my liking for the series. Like because that's about the part of Sword Art that was actually good. I liked it. Now I don't know how they're going to do the movies, because just based on the way that progressive works, to my understanding, they would have to do a lot of movies to cover
like
the entire art. Yeah, exactly.
Every novel is like covering a floor. So.
Yeah. So it's like there's no. I have no idea how they're going to do that. I don't know if there's going to have like a time skip involved or what. But I did like the Sword Art on What's that?
I was just gonna say they probably eventually they'll do like 1 or 2, maybe 3 movies, like a trilogy, and then they'll make it into a TV show.
Yeah. So we'll see how they do that. But just in my opinion, the other parts of Sword Art Online, I just don't like them as much. And I've talked with you all about this before, but I'm gonna say this like in public for the first time. I feel that Sword Art Online is the Drake of anime, in terms of you don't have to like him. Like Drake is one of those guys where it's like he had his time where it seemed like he was innovative with his music, but now it's kind of like, you're not really you're going to get the same old from Drake. And Sword Art is kind of like that. But the thing with Drake is you cannot deny his influence. His influence is all over hip hop, and whether you like him or not, you cannot deny that unless you just want to be delusional about it. And Sword Art is the same way. You could say whatever you want to about Sword Art. You could say that it's the worst thing ever, worst isekai, a piece of shit, whatever. You cannot deny that Sword Art Online is really the anime that kind of kicked us into the whole isekai era. Like, it's the most influential in that regard, and that could be a whole other podcast topic in and of itself. But yeah, Sword Art Online, in my opinion, just that first half, I like it, but then after that, it's just not the same for me. And we'll see how the progressive movies do. If they continue the trend, the first one was good, so if they continue to follow that trend, then hey, I'll continue to watch them. Real quick, the other anime that I have, and I might just do one. The other one is one that came out last year that I really liked, that was animated by Mappa. It was called The Iditen Deities Only Know Peace.
You told me about that one.
Yeah, it's weird because it was really good the way that it started off, and I felt like no one was really talking about it, which was weird, especially since it was a Mappa show too. But maybe it was for the better they didn't talk about it, because to give an explanation for our audience if you've never heard of it, how the show starts off is like these humans are under attack by demons, and in this world, the humans, when they pray and like offer their thoughts, they can create gods based on those prayers and their thoughts. And so those gods, when they're birthed into the world, they fight off the demons. And so it starts off with the demons running amok, and the humans, they have their prayers and their thoughts. They're asking, for the gods to save them. And so the Iditen deities, they show up, and they end up wrecking all the demons. And I think after they wreck the demons, some time passes, and only one of the Iditen deities is left to like guard the seal that's been placed on the demons. And it just kind of goes from there in terms of like new gods are created, and the one that's been around for like thousands of years, she raises those to protect the seal and everything. It just goes from there. The show had incredible animation. The fights were really good. It was surprisingly pretty graphic. Like, people were getting beat up quite regularly on the show. I know I showed you some gifs of that Sage, where
I remember the gifs. I was like, yo, this is a lot, bro.
Yeah, the action was pretty intense, but the show was really good in my opinion, and it kept building up. Like, the world building was really good, But then it got to like the last couple of episodes, and it felt like we were kind of solving the main problem, but there was still more that needed to be done. And then we got to like episode 11, and I don't even want to call it a cliffhanger. I just want to say the series is unfinished. And to my understanding, I think the manga itself isn't finished, which I guess, have some shows where you start them and then they end and it's like, okay, it's pretty much like go read the manga time. In this case, I don't even know if you can really read the manga like that because there might not be much left, which begs the question, why'd you even animate this? Yeah, why'd you even make this or animate this in the first place if you were just going to leave it unfinished? So it's kind of like, you're trying to, maybe I shouldn't make this reference, but anyway, it's like you're getting me there, but then you're just kind of leaving me hanging at the end. It's like, yeah, but I don't know.
The dots on that one.
Yeah, exactly. But I like the show, but man, just the way that it left off is just like, why would you do this? Like, why would you waste my time having this really entertaining show and then get to the end and not only like not even leave it on a cliffhanger, but just leave it unfinished? Like if you watch episode 11 of that show, it literally just feels unfinished. Like I was literally expecting another episode after that and it never came. And I was like, wow, you all are real pieces of work for doing this to me. But yeah, those are my two shows because, I'm not going to take up too much time. But yeah, Sword Art, just because it started off great. Like I like the premise of Sword Art, even if it kind of fumbles the ball a little bit toward the end. And then the other seasons, they're just whatever. And then the I-10 Deities, I just hate the fact that it started off so good, but then just goes nowhere. And that's probably the thing that I probably hate the most about some anime is when they're good, but then it just stops or it doesn't get another season. That probably pisses me off the most. And there's so many shows where I've watched that I could easily go on for days about it.
That's a podcast topic in itself, actually.
Yeah, so I'm not even going to go any further on that. So somebody else go.
So I will say, as far as Sword Art, I kind of agree. Like I, for full context, I watched Sword Art the first season. I watched half of the second season. I didn't finish the Gun Gale Online part. Then I watched the spinoff Gun Gale Online, and then I've watched the most of the first season of Alicization. So the problem is Kirito. He's the same guy every time you see him. Yeah. He's got just enough angst to make him like tortured, but he's good at everything, and everyone fucking likes him, so it doesn't matter that he's tortured. Like he's just so perfectly likable that he loops back around to being unlikable in some instances. The animation's always solid. I agree, it does fall off. Like it has its questionable elements in season 1. By the end of season 2, it's legitimately awful. It's legitimately like, what are we doing here? And then season 3, Alicization is a lot of the same fight scene type stuff. It's a lot of like the good parts of it are the fight scenes. I'll say that, and then everything else is kind of like
yet another woman to fall in love with Kirito, huh?
yeah, it is a lot of that. Like they introduce somebody to make the like that type shit, and I'm like, I guess it does have like a real like. And here's the problem with Sword Art, more than anything else. The problem is it raises so many fascinating questions about technology in the universe that it's in, especially Alicization, where it starts raising questions about AI, where I'm like, yo, what in the fuck is going on? I can't believe that was like there are certain things that they do where you're like, if you're saying this is possible, then I don't care about Kirito anymore. I care about the overall universe of Sword Art Online. I want you to zoom out some and start showing me what's going on in the rest of this universe, because it's really gotten into some fascinating science fiction questions, and they're more interested in more harem shenanigans. So I agree that it fell off, and it fell off for like some really sad reasons. Like if the writer could like get away from his Mary Sue, Gary Stu tendencies and write about the science fiction universe that he's created, you'd have a really fascinating show.
Yeah, but, it's hilarious because we say anime that fell off, but Sword Art clearly hasn't fallen off. Like it's still massively successful. It fell off
quality-wise.
Yeah.
And I mean, like, it's in that position right now that a lot of anime get into where, and then sometimes they don't make it out, where they do TV series, and then they'll start doing high-budget movies, and then some of them eventually make it back to TV series and go back on, and then some of them keep doing movies until the movie does really badly, and then they never get back to TV. So I don't know, like, but I will say one thing that's undeniable, just like you said, is that its influence on anime, like at least a third of the anime that come out every year now is like a fucking isekai, and that started with them. Like I do research on older anime for my job, and like when I look at older anime, a lot of times I see like there is no isekai, there's no I landed in another world, like none of that shit. Like before Sword Art Online came along, those kind of ideas were few and far in between. Rakeem, what's up, man? Like what anime do you think fell off?
I don't know if this would be a controversial topic because this anime fell off for a really specific reason. Um, and the anime I want to talk about actually is Naruto.
And the reason, let's go.
And the reason I wanted to get into Naruto,
want the smoke. I'm with it. Let's go.
I don't know if I want to smoke, but the reason I'm bringing out Naruto isn't necessarily just for the narrative reasons. So I'll give a full context of my relationship with Naruto. When I was a kid, one of my best friends had Shonen Jump, and the first manga I saw in Shonen Jump was Naruto. So that was my first exposure to manga. And when I watched the show as a child, I fell in love with the anime. I like the characters, I like the arcs, I like the storylines. The Chunin exam is one of the best like examples of how to do an arc ever. Like it's just really great example of like showing how all these different characters work, the systems that's going to happen, like intrigue from the outside, all types of things. And I really followed that original run of Naruto, pretty much all the way to the end of the rescue Sasuke arc. For those of you who don't know what Naruto is, I don't know why you wouldn't know what Naruto is if you're an anime fan, but for those of you who don't know what Naruto is, basically it's an anime about ninjas. There's a kid, he's a demon inside of him. He's emo because he has no friends because there's a demon inside him. He has a stigma on him, and he grows up to become the ninja, and he wants to be the head ninja one day. That's the premise of Naruto. There's a whole bunch of BS outside of that and a lot of crazy stuff. But back to the story. My problem with Naruto is a problem that many people have, and I think as an anime community, we kind of just like throw it to the side. Too much freaking filler. There's a lot of filler in the show itself, but my problem was the filler at the conclusion of the story when Naruto defeats Sasuke, goes off for his training. That's essentially the end of the show. And to my understanding, that's almost like 100 episodes of filler after that.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it goes on for 2 years before Shippuden shows up.
So I get why you do that, but as a watcher, if I was a casual fan, imagine watch 100 episodes that mean nothing, with stories that mean nothing, that tie to nothing. That's essentially 2 or 3 seasons of a show that mean literally nothing and connect to nothing. That's unacceptable. And the reason I tied it into that, because it had so much filler, my hype as a viewer, even going to Shippuden, just freaking died. When I watched Shippuden, I didn't just watch the show. I only came in at specific arcs, like the parts where the Akatsuki showed up and I wanted to know what the Akatsuki were about, or certain battles and things like that. Watching Naruto regularly, that was over for me after that filler arc. And it really came home to me years later, after, like, towards the end of when Naruto's run was about to end, during the war arc. I came home to my little brother, and I was talking to him because he's the biggest Naruto fan on earth. You know, for a lot of us, we grew up on DBZ. Naruto is his DBZ. That is his magnum opus. That is his favorite anime ever.
That's how a lot of like Gen Z are now. Yeah.
Yeah. So I asked him, "Hey man, how's Naruto doing? I haven't watched it lately. How's it going? How you enjoying it?" He said, "I stopped watching." I was like, "What?" He said, "I stopped watching." I was like, "Why?" "Too much filler. I got tired of it. I got tired of these scenes. We're going back and seeing stuff we saw an episode ago. Got tired of tie-ins to characters that we didn't care about. When you fill up your show with so much extra melodrama and backstory on stuff from like years and years ago on top of that, and sometimes you have filler inside filler, you're in a filler arc and then add filler on top of that, too much. So my problem with Naruto falling off is that narratively, the filler really damaged his reputation. To me, I would love, as a fan, and you can not agree with me, that's fine, but as a fan, I would love for Naruto to get like a Kai. Since the anime's finished, let's revisit Naruto. It's one of those animes I think that it could get a Kai, people will watch it, cut down all the filler, give the straight arcs, go straight through, maybe update the animation in some elements if you can. People will watch that. that's what I would like to see from Naruto. Until then, I'm never watching it again.
You got to
tried
finish
to watch it
Boruto
recently.
first.
So I know Boruto's still running right now. I'm not watching Boruto either. Like my hype for Naruto just died. Just too much filler. Still to this day, I can't bring myself to fully invest in it. I tried to recently watch Naruto again. I got to like 30 episodes, and once again, it's just not there anymore. Like that era when I just ran to filler after filler after filler after filler after filler. Stories I just didn't care about, man. I don't know what's going on, man. I don't care about Choji going to the store and buying some chips. I don't care. I don't care about Rock Lee breakdancing. I don't know what's going on. Just whatever's happening, stop it. So yeah, for me, that caused kind of not obviously the popularity of Naruto never went away. It's still to me a pop culture icon of anime. Really, it like integrated into people's headbands, running around in school, the hand signs. I mean, me and Rob would be in classroom, dudes do the hand signs in class. So popularity is still there. I don't have a problem with popularity. I just think quality wise, that filler really damaged the anime as a whole. And not even getting into the parts with like characters that were developed a little bit in the previous show, just completely fell off the map. We didn't know what the heck was going on with them. And kind of over the top stuff that happened towards the end of it, where the action got so over the top and so the scale got so high, it was hard to really care anymore. But yeah, that's the example of Naruto. My other example for me is one that's kind of unfortunate because this next example is Tokyo Ghoul. And the example
I was wondering who's going to bring this up.
I had to bring it up because I have not watched all 3 seasons. I have not. And this is a part of the reason why. So the first season to me was amazing. I was very invested in the storyline. For those of you who don't know, Tokyo Ghoul is an anime. It's very interesting because it takes this kind of horror premise where you have a world where you have humans and you have other humanoid characters. They eat human flesh and they have to coexist in the same society. So it's essentially like almost like vampires, kind of like a vampire storyline to a degree. The main character, I believe, is Ken. I believe his name is. I can't remember his name.
Kaneki.
Yeah, Ken Kaneki. He goes out. He's trapped by a date he was going on for a young lady. She's trying to be a ghoul. She tries to eat him. They both get hurt in the hospital. The doctor puts ghoul organs in his body to save him, and he becomes part ghoul. And the reason I really was drawn into this show at first, I really freaking liked it because he had to balance this conflict within himself that I'm human, but now I'm becoming a ghoul. And like, what is humanity? What is being a person? Are ghouls, because they're man eaters, are they not worth saving? Are they all evil? Those different questions the characters he interacting with. This is how society treat these people on the other side. It's a very interesting dynamic in the anime I like. And towards the end of the anime, he comes in contact with like some of the more hardcore ghouls, more extreme, more monstrous, and he ends up getting tortured in the very, very end of the season, like getting tortured. And in this torture scene, his character breaks and he fully invests himself into becoming a ghoul full time. No longer has that conflict. I thought it was an amazing story told that first season, even with that ending. When the second season started, it felt like a whole different anime. Now he's with a group. He's like now he's with a different group. They're like freedom fighter ghouls fighting against the government, and his tone is different. His character's different. You got a whole bunch of new characters I've never seen before, and it was really, I'm gonna be honest with you, it was just basically hard for me to invest in this because it felt like the anime I watched wasn't there anymore. And a part of that, might just because the decision to him to go full ghoul, that tension he had as like balancing humanity and being a ghoul went away, which is what drove me into the show in the first place. I just never could get back into that the same way. And I thought that was unfortunate. I thought Tokyo Ghoul was a very unique anime. I may go back and finish season 2 and 3 just to get full perspective on it, because I do want to do that at some point. But it really turned me off from the show. I didn't even finish it.
You're probably better off just reading the manga, to be honest.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The last one, this one's interesting to me because I don't know if it fell off or I changed, but I think it was me who changed, and it was Blue Exorcist. Why this anime is important to me isn't really just the anime. So Blue Exorcist, for those who've never seen that, is an anime about these two brothers who live in this monastery, And one day, some demons attack, and he finds out that one of the brothers is literally the spawn of Satan. And Satan has come for his son so he can get his body and come into the human world. Obviously, don't want that to happen, and so he sends the boy into to an exorcism school where he meets, he gets trained, learns how to, fight against demons and things like that, and kind of hide away from the demons so he can be, doesn't happen. Which is well and dandy. The hook in the beginning of the anime at the beginning was very, very cool. It's very dark. It was very foreboding. I was very interested, but went into the school portion of it. It kind of fell into more of the traditional anime tropes. Now he has a group. Everybody has like their own purpose, their personalities, and the reason I brought up Blue Exorcist is this was the moment back then. I don't remember what year that came out. 2011, 2012, maybe around that time. This anime, watching this anime in the middle of this season was when I stopped watching anime. Period, for like a year or two. I did not watch anime on my own. I only watched it with my friends. If they was on in the living room, they were watching something. I just stopped watching anime. I think a part of it was that I kind of got tired of certain tropes in anime. I thought the premise they had in the beginning was so dark and foreboding, that tension and all that. I wish they had like really just dived into that more instead of going to the school section when it kind of fell off. And of course, they had a season 2, the Kyoto Saga, but in the season 2 they had a whole bunch of filler in that anime, so it kind of didn't have the great pacing as well. I just talked about filler on Naruto for a few minutes, so you already know how I feel about filler now. For me, Naruto, Tokyo Ghoul, and Blue Exorcist were the 3 main ones. I'll give an honorable mention to an anime I love, Dead Man Wonderland, for one of the reasons Terrence brought up. Freaking love the anime, but it got to the last episode, and then it went into a side story about one of the characters that had nothing to do with the current plot. And that was the last episode of the season and of the show because it never returned. So it ended on such a weird, uninteresting way because it was just his backstory. And then the show never followed up and came back with another season. I was very disappointed in how that show ended, and I'm still disappointed this day it never returned. It's one of my favorite shows of that era that never came back. And that's just the unfortunate reality of being an anime fan, is that some shows you love are only going to get one season or a shortened season. Now, sometimes they just don't get another season. Sometimes you just got to, like Tara said, read the manga, and sometimes reading the manga ain't enough. The manga's unfinished. But yeah, those are my main ones.
You definitely picked some like really. I was wondering who was gonna be the first person to say Tokyo Ghoul, and then there's one other one that I haven't watched, but y'all have watched. At least I know Terrence has watched it. I think Will has watched it, and I'm wondering if Will's gonna bring it up. But like there's definitely some shows that I'm like, okay, like some popular shows. Naruto's a good choice, by the way. Like the interesting thing to me as I age as an anime fan is watching opinions kind of shift from one side to the other. When we were young, generally people thought filler was a bad thing. Some people don't even understand what filler is. Filler is not character development. That's not filler. I'm sorry. Like, just because it's not immediately pushing the plot forward, if you don't care about the characters, then there's no reason to push the plot forward because you don't care about the characters. But like, filler is just, it wasn't in the manga. Like, we took something and just made a story up because it's not in the manga. And the big 3 and Dragon Ball Z to a lesser extent, but like all the big long-running shonen anime had a habit of putting a lot of filler in, and the other episode lengthening tricks. I remember Kenichi did this thing that was really strange, where really you only had to watch half the episode because the second half of the episode, because the first half was literally the strongest disciple. Yeah, his Kenichi, History's Strongest Disciple.
Oh man, you know what? I could have brought that up in terms of something that fell off, because yeah, that show fell off in my opinion. But go ahead, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I remember you said the manga fell off to you.
The manga fell off hard in my opinion, but like I said, that's a whole other discussion.
But yeah, like I remember the Kenichi had this bad habit of filler, and it was the weirdest take on filler I'd ever seen. Where like the second half of the episode was new content, but the first half was literally just a recap of what happened in the last episode. You could get through multiple episodes just by like not watching the first half. You just skip to the part where they show like the actual titles cut, the title title card, excuse me. And like you'd be like, okay, well here from here on the new content would come in, and that would be 10, 11 minutes into a 22-minute episode. So like yeah, filler is out of hand, and Naruto particularly is probably the most notorious. Naruto and One Piece. One Piece had a bad habit of just like stretching out the episode and making everything take forever and fucking the pacing up. And even One Piece hardcores are like, yeah, the pacing's bad, but I still love the story. I love Oda or whatever. But like Naruto fans, they have gone so far that like now you have younger fans that are like, man, sometimes I just want to see Choji go buy some chips with his friends or some shit like that. I've literally seen opinions like that online. I've seen younger people go, sometimes you just want to see the boys go out and hey, like you like the characters enough. I'm like, yeah, maybe sometimes, but I don't want that shit for like 50 episodes. What's up, Keen?
Exactly. I was gonna say, that's kind of how I feel too. Is that I don't mind having some filler. Like I said, like my favorite example of filler ever was that Bleach arc with the Zanpakuto. That shit was so well done.
Yeah,
I really like
agree.
that arc.
I agree.
Very well done. But when you go from Zanpakuto arc to Ichigo in Arabia, you didn't go on too far. You jump the shark. I don't even see Ichigo on the fly carpet. I don't even see Choji buying chips. I don't see Rock Lee.
You don't want to see Piccolo driving a car?
Now people like that one.
I was fine with that. That was funny. But yeah, man, like I think a part of it too is that we kind of I know there was an era of anime where it's like, and people still do this. Just skip that filler, don't worry about it. But when the skip that filler, don't worry about it, it's like 30 episodes or 50 episodes
50.
or 100 episodes.
There we go.
I'm skipping a third of the show, half the show. Like, what is that? That's an indictment on like the writing. I like the writing of the show, but like indictment on the pacing of the show, the blocking of the show, not to skip that many episodes. Nobody would tell you, like, if you imagine watching Game of Thrones, they said just skip season 2, 3, and 4.
They're gonna tell you to skip season 7 and 8. Is what they tell you. But I mean, I see where you're going with that. And yeah, Naruto. By the way, Keem, push your microphone back.
I was actually just gonna say that. Yeah, I'm. Thank you.
Yeah, you were peeking a little bit.
Yeah, you've been peeking. You've been mad peeking for a little bit.
Yeah, I normally we try to correct these things off the show, but I'm starting to go with the garbage truck on fire thing, and we gonna correct it as we go along, guys. Y'all just go ahead and load it. But yeah, okay. So like with Naruto, like I think there was because I remember watching, and I mean like just to show my age. I remember watching the Valley of the End fight when I was in high school, and like it was new, like it had come out in Japan, not in America on Cartoon Network. It was just coming out in Japan. I think I was 17, and I was watching that, and I was like, oh wow, this is cool. But I knew because I was reading the manga, I'm like, okay, well you kind of caught up with the manga. What are you gonna do? And they were like, we're gonna do filler, and I'm like, how much filler you gonna do? Oh, I would soon find out. It was like 3 years later, I think, before they finally came back and got off filler. Like, literally, you can watch Naruto up to, like, I think, episode 130 or something like that. And the show goes up to, like, 220, 225 or something. And you can just stop. Like, once you get to Valley of the End, there's no need to keep watching unless you're just, like, one of those people that want to see Choji go buy some goddamn chips. Otherwise, like, there's no reason for you to watch it. You can just stop, and you can move on to Shippuden. And, like, it's crazy because this is not how it should work. Between Naruto and Naruto Shippuden, there's like 700 episodes, I believe. I believe it's 700, 720, somewhere in that range. There's only 700 chapters of the Naruto manga. The anime should never match up episode-wise to the chapters in the manga. It takes 2 to 3 chapters of a manga to make a full episode of an anime when the pacing is right. So like really, Naruto should only go somewhere around 200 episodes entirely, and somehow with 700 episodes, I'm like, man, y'all can have that. Okay, we've gotten a little bit off topic. Will, what anime do you feel like you fell off to you?
Well, since King beat me to the punch on Tokyo Ghoul, I had one, and it's not a case of it falling off per se, but it's more a case of it doing something that I hated did, because I was enjoying it at first. First season, I was fine. That second season, it was okay till that last few episodes hit. And me being the other kind of staunch slice of life rom-com guy, or emo, I hated the way that ended to me. Now, I can say it now. I'm not saying the show fell off. I'm not saying this. I feel like for me, I hate the way it ended because I'm thinking to myself, you got 2 seasons out of the show. I felt it could have ended at 1 maybe, but how you had me invested in this little thing that's happening with these two on screen, and then there's this other thing in the background that's happening that I'm enjoying. I'm seeing it. It's there. You're writing it to happen. But then you decide to take the rug from under me and decide, you know what, we're going to pull from the light novel. That's where we're going to get this ending from. So I'm just sitting there like, you almost made me break my laptop over that. And I was truly invested in that show. And I hated it like with a passion. I'm just like, I don't want to see no more of this show. I don't want to see Kirino no more. Don't put her in front of me because I may just break something.
Kuroneko was clearly the better choice.
And thank you. Thank you. She was clearly the better choice. She was clearly the better choice. Like I said, that's just a personal choice for me. I was pissed about that. Now, another show that I consider kind of fell off, and I think it could have maybe done something. It could have done better because it had the right kind of premise, the right set of characters to go about this to me. It just feels like it ended in a really weird spot, and it was Codebreaker, if anyone's ever heard of it. Now, I watched that show on a whim because I saw it. I was just scanning through shows one day. I saw it. I was like, Codebreaker. Sounds interesting. Had an opening by Grand Rodeo. If y'all know who Grand Rodeo is, look them up.
Hype.
But I'm like, okay, this ought to be a show for me because it started off with this girl riding on a bus seeing some dude getting cooked alive in blue flames. I was like, oh, that's a way to start. And then after that, it kind of went into almost like sort of Avatar's like kind of territory where like every person that he kind of ran into had a different element and they all fought differently. Because like this dude had like a twisted sense of justice. Like he was on the dark side of that, and where this girl he was with was like, nah, you can't do it that way. Like we can apprehend them, but don't kill them. It was almost like he was Batman and she was like, no.
No, it was like he was Punisher and she was Spider-Man or Superman or something.
There you go, that works. And I just feel like it ended kind of weird. Like it could have went a little bit further than just like I think 12 or 13 episodes, if I'm not mistaken.
Well, I believe
the show wasn't that long. The show wasn't that long, and I also seen that it wasn't just a great adaptation of the manga either. And I'm just like, wow, y'all really tripped down the stairs. Y'all did well in like certain aspects, but it just kind of flopped. So that's my other one. And my last choice was, what did I write down? I'm gonna leave it at those two because I feel like those two just kind of fit the mold of not great, could have been better, and in Imo's case, she could have just went with the best girl.
They even had the nerve to make OVAs to where he had like a not I wouldn't say like a come to Jesus talk. Well, yeah, he kind of did have a come to Jesus talk with her. It had her crying and everything. I was like, man, what are we doing here?
Exactly, bro. I was so pissed about that, bro. I never wanted to see nothing with that character ever again. No more Kirino. Leave the little blonde bitch behind. I'm tired of her.
That's some good salt. I would say Codebreaker. I remember Codebreaker, and that's a very good choice. I remember reading Codebreaker the manga when I was like just out of high school. I think it was like 2008 or something like that. And I found the Codebreaker manga, and I was like, oh snap, this is hype. And at the time, there was a thing I used to do. I find a new manga, and I go, man. I say I used to do. I kind of still do this. If I really liked the manga, I'd stop reading it and hope that it would get an anime. And so, years later, it got an anime, and I was like, oh, now it's about to get live because I liked it. Like I liked the idea of like this character, this protagonist. And he was like, I think his name was Ray. His partner like was Sakura. I think she had a weird name. Sakura
Koji.
Yeah. And so like he had the power to burn people alive, and he would always do it. Like he was called a Codebreaker. That was like why the show was named that. And he was called a Codebreaker, and he'd go around like dispensing justice. The first people that you see him burning alive are like, well, not the first, but like the second. The people Sakura sees him kill are like these like brats that are like about to murder a homeless person. And he's like, well, that's it for them. They forfeited their right to existence, and so he's like murdering them all. And so like after that, she's like, hold on, you can't just kill people like this. And he was like, why not? Like, these people don't serve no purpose. There's no reason for them to continue to draw air. And so, like, it was a fascinating story of, like, this back and forth between these two characters. And then, of course, there was going to be, like, some more, because I believe it was a shonen series. Even though it had darker elements, I believe it was a shonen. It had all these, like, dark elements and shonen stuff they was going to try to insert in the manga. And I was like, oh, that's hype. I can't wait to see this in the anime. And then the anime gets this, like, really truncated, 13 episodes, and I'm like, man, and then it wasn't a very accurate adaptation, so I was hella disappointed. This is in itself a podcast topic about like anime that went off script and ruined themselves. There are a couple of anime before I get to my choices. I have three that I think I'm surprised nobody mentioned. Well, one nobody was gonna mention, but I'm gonna mention it because I'm that guy. And then the other one is one that I'm surprised nobody said, especially Will and Terrence. Nobody wanted to say The Promised Neverland.
Since I never watched that's kind of like an obvious choice, and I never finished season 2, so I feel like I can't really. I just know what people have said about season 2, and I watched a few episodes of season 2, and yeah, I just never finished it to really comment on it. So that's the only reason why I kind of left it off.
I only saw the first episode, and that was good.
I mean, the first season is like really.
The first season is fire, 10 out of 10. Like
most certainly.
Yeah, is great. But yeah, the second season, from what everybody said, it just fell off just because it skips so much material from the manga. It's just like it flash forwards to the ending for whatever reason, and I don't understand why. Because the first season was popular, so why would you want to shortchange the second season, or why would you not want to do multiple seasons? That's one of those things where it's like I don't know what's going on.
I don't know how popular it was in Japan, so I don't want to like speculate. Like, it's,
maybe that's the reason.
There's a difference between a show being big in America and a show being big in Japan. If it wasn't big in Japan, then I can understand why they were like, let's just skip and try to wrap it on up. But if it was big in Japan, then I'm back with you. Like, I don't understand what they were doing. I'm a horror fan, so I never watched it, but I do. Of course, I keep up with anime conversation every season, and so like I remember that one being a big one that like everybody was like, nah, this ain't it. Another one is Wonder Egg Priority. I remember hearing that one kind of fell off.
I never finished it, so it's funny. The ones you're bringing up, I thought about mentioning, but it's like because I never finished them, I don't want somebody coming at me. It's like, oh, you didn't finish the show. You have no right to talk about it. So it's like, you know what? I'm not going to even put a target on my back that way. I'm only going to talk about something that I've like finished in some kind of way. So there you go.
Well, it's interesting because I feel like, and I could be wrong about this guess, but I feel like you didn't finish those because maybe you got behind and then you heard, yeah, this sucks. And you're like, well, there's no reason for me to go back and check.
Well, yeah, that's true. Yeah.
That's true.
I will say that Wonder Egg, from what I've heard, because I did watch like maybe like 7 episodes of Wonder Egg, and unfortunately, and this has kind of been a trend for me, some anime like I'll get to like the midpoint and I'll get toward the end, and sometimes I just don't finish them just because life happens or another season comes along and there's another 50 anime they have to keep up there, so sometimes stuff just gets left behind. But in Wonder Egg's case, from what I watched, it was really good, and it was doing something. It was one of the more unique anime of that season when it came out. And from what I heard, when it got to the end, it completely fumbled the bag or fumbled the ball on the ending and just the characters in general. So you're kind of right. Like, based on what I heard, I don't want to finish it because it's like, I don't want to be disappointed. So
you had good memories of this, and you trying to go back, and it's going to be like, nah, this sucks. You ruined my memories, which is part of the problem I have with one of the other ones that I'm going to bring up. And then the last one that I'm going to bring up, it's not on my list, but it is worth bringing up just because I was personally insulted. 03 Full Metal Alchemist. I don't care what nobody said. Like after that first season, I was like, man, you don't get this, and like it just never felt right. I'm sorry. Like I remember Adult Swim was airing it, and I was like a huge fan of it. And then like they went away for a long time, and then when it came back, it just didn't feel right no more. And I couldn't place my finger on why. It felt like it lost its plot. It felt like the characters were kind of aimless, and I didn't understand. I'm like, what is going on? Like, this doesn't feel as good. And it's not like it's out. At first, I was like, this is a GOAT show. This is GOAT anime. And then it got to the second half, and I'm like, man, what the fuck is going on? Who the fuck is Dante? And why do I care? And like, what in the hell has happened? And then come to find out, like, and I didn't know this at the time, but come to find out, like, oh yeah, that's when they started to deviate from the manga. I'm like, oh yeah, they shouldn't have done that. And so like, I remember when Brotherhood first came out, and it came out not too long after Dragon Ball Kai. And so like Kai came out, and I was like, oh, it's not completely from the ground remade. It's just, you know, the old 80s animation. And so like I'm looking at Brotherhood, and it's like, I'm like, oh, I mean, yeah, but I didn't like the second half of Full Metal Alchemist. And it was like, no, this is gonna be different. It's gonna be adapting the manga full. I'm like, I guess. And the hype just kept building, and finally I checked out Brotherhood, and it's like, I will say this about Brotherhood, and it is a bit of a flaw. the first 10 episodes kind of speed run through all the story of like the first half of Full Metal Alchemist 03.
It's cranking
And
that up.
yeah, it's not as good. Like it's the first 10 episodes of Brotherhood are not as good as the first half of Full Metal Alchemist 03 to me at all. But like once you get past all the stuff that you saw in the manga, I mean in the first series, it 10 out of 10. So like I understand, like in the end I wound up being like, okay, this is still one of my favorite anime of all time. But like the 03 version, just it was great to a point, and then it kind of fell off a cliff. Like that's one of the first things I think of. Another anime. I'm gonna go ahead and we'll split them up. We'll split them up. So there's one anime and Rakeem talked about falling out of love with anime tropes. And I remember somewhere around 2012, 2013, I was just getting kind of exhausted with anime tropes. And there was finally, like, I was seeing so many anime and I'm like, man, this is just like this other anime that I've seen. And this is just like this other anime that I've seen. And then finally, this anime comes out in, let me make sure I'm right about this, 2014, called Rage of Bahamut. And it was like nothing like any other anime I'd ever seen. It wasn't an isekai, which was becoming more common. It wasn't on no harem shit, which was super fucking common at that point. It was just a unique, like, it felt, I used to say it didn't feel like an anime at all. Like, the animation didn't look like an anime. It didn't rely on a lot of the anime tropes. It was just a straightforward fantasy anime about this, like, ne'er-do-well named Favaro and this bounty hunter that was chasing him. And then, like, they both met this girl who had a connection to Bahamut, this powerful dragon that was so strong that it took the forces of hell and the forces of heaven to put him down. And they barely did it even then. And so, like, this new chick shows up and she has a connection to Bahamut. And they're like, okay, well, how can we, like, I think her name, what was her name? Amira? Yeah. So, like, she like, they get connected to her, and to her, they're, like, trying to, like, okay, how can we lock Bahamut up? Because it seemed like he about to get out again. And the show was just fascinating. It felt like a more adult version of the Saturday morning cartoon shows I used to watch. And I used to love that show. And then the sequel came out, and my God, I fucking hated that sequel. Like, I tried to like it. But like, the sequel tosses all the characters that you love. Like, Favaro's a background character. His, like, the bounty hunter Kaiser, he's a background character now. Amira's fucking gone. You have this new protagonist called Nina. She's like, she doesn't have any of the things that made you like Amira. She doesn't stand out. It's very much in the, it takes on a more romantic element too, to the point where I'm like, I wasn't looking for that. Like, I don't mind romance in my anime sometimes, but like it had a really superficial romance to begin with, and then like the action elements are like played down to a point where you're like, this isn't the show that I wanted to watch anymore. And I think I got about 14 episodes in, and I could not finish it. Like, I couldn't go a step further. I'm like, I don't like this protagonist. I like the cute little duck character that she worked with, who I think was like a god or something like that. I thought that was cute. But other than that, I'm like, man, you can keep this show. This shit trash. Like, I'm gonna pretend like there was no sequel. I think the sequel's called Virgin Soul. I'm like, man, fuck this show. The other show that really pissed me off, and this is a more popular series, is Code Geass.
There we go. Man. I was waiting on it.
I was waiting too. I didn't want to take it.
Code Geass is what made me pick this topic. I think that's what, like, we were talking about this in the Discord, and I was like, animated fell off is a good ass topic, just because it is. You say what, Keen?
The main event.
I mean, yeah, it is the main event for, like, in terms of popularity, for sure. Like, man, okay, so I liked Code Geass when it first came out, and that's why I mentioned the Sunrise effect, because Sunrise had the same problem with both Code Geass and Gundam 00, where, like, the first season was like this, like, captivating thing that the entire anime community was talking about when they came out, unless you were like, I won't take that shot. But like the most of the anime community was like really into like Code Geass and Gundam 00, and like they went away. Like you get your first 25 episodes and the show just goes away for like, a season, and you get it like if the show came out in the fall, then the next time you see it is in the spring. If the show came out in the spring, the next time you see it is in the fall. So like they both went on break. And when they both came back, they weren't the same show. They weren't as good as they used to be. But I feel like Gundam 00 like weathered that storm of not being as good a lot better to me than Code Geass did. Cause like if you watch Code Geass season 1, like I remember I had a homeboy, like when I first got to college, I'd already finished Code Geass, and I like one of my homeboys was watching it, and I was like, hey man, look, when you get to season 2, stop. Just pretend like you saw the ending. Like the cliffhanger is the ending. Like just move on. And he didn't take my advice. And when he finished, he was like, I wish I hadn't finished this show. Like it wasn't as good. Like it just wasn't that. It wasn't all of that. Like the clip. Like okay, season 1 ends on this cliffhanger. And if you, I mean, like we've been kind of spoiling off and on, so I'm just gonna go full spoilers. Fuck it.
I mean, look, man, Code Geass is over 10 years old, man. If you ain't seen it, I mean,
if you ain't seen it by now, I mean, you just ain't watch. You don't. If you ain't seen it by now, you're not gonna watch it.
You either not gonna watch it or you'll be alright whether it's spoiled for you or not.
Or you haven't been born yet or something. I don't know.
Some shit like that. Yeah, exactly. So like at the end of Code Geass season 1, the protagonist Lelouch, he's like, he's been trying to keep a secret identity. He's like, they've been kind of splitting his time between being at school and being like this revolutionary fighting against this Imperial army, the Britannian army and shit. And so like you get to the end and it's like, all right, it ain't no more school shit. Like the war has broken out. The Black Knights of Zero are squaring up with Britannian army, and it's just time. It's time now. And so like it ends on this cliffhanger of like Lelouch's friend Suzaku, who's like both a former childhood friend of his, but also for whatever reason a dog of Britannia, and he betrays Lelouch partially because he's just a fuck guy. Like he's just a fuck boy. Like he just he just destined to be a bootlicking piece of shit. I fucking hate that character. I'm sorry. I just fucking despise
Let's
Suzaku.
go.
But like the other half of it is like Lelouch was directly and indirectly responsible for getting Suzaku's love, Euphemia, killed. Like, and in the dumbest plot twist of the show, like where he literally confronts Euphemia, and Euphemia kind of figures out who he is, and he's like, man, I can't kill you. Like, you really hadn't done nothing wrong. I just take the L. Like, we're gonna have to figure some other kind of way out of this. And then he just happens to say some wild shit, and then they kind of do a callback because, like, at one point they tell you his ability to mind control people he'll lose control of it. And it just so happens that right at that moment, he loses control and turns her into like this psychopath who goes around killing all the Japanese. And he like, yeah, exactly, with the machine gun. She just starts gunning down Japanese.
Yeah, like
people.
he literally told her, it's like, if I wanted to control you, I could say kill all Japanese and you would do it.
And I will never forget that scene.
That was such a weird, I'll admit
that shit was, it was a bad, like that shit was, and they set it up, but it was still stupid in how it happened. Mm-hmm. And like, to me, that was really when the show started to fall off, but I was like, I'll follow it to the conclusion of season 1. Let's see how it ends. And it ends with like Suzaku being like, man, look, you ruined Euphemia. You used your mind control powers to turn her into a murderer. She was a good person. And he was like, look, I'm taking you over there to the Britannian army, yada, yada, yada. And so like they have this stalemate and it ends. And you're like, okay, well, now it's got to like build from here. Nope. They open season 2 with them back in school. Why are they back in school? Because like Keem said, everything always got to go somehow wind up in a school again. Because that's the only thing that they know how to do when they tell stories. In the same way that America always got its same fucking tropes that they got to rely on and shit. Like people just can't break out of the fucking tropes that they constantly use to tell stories, and it sucks. So like we back in school with no explanation, and they spend the first 7 or 8 episodes, I think, exactly mirroring what happens in the first season 1, episode 1, mirrors season 2, episode 1, season 1, episode 2, mirrors season 2, episode 2, and it happens for like 8 episodes before they finally break away and do unique, original shit. And by that point, I'm already like, what the fuck are we doing? Like, why is this show so bad? And then by the end, I was just numb and annoyed, and I didn't care about any of the characters, and I just wanted it to be fucking over. And like, thank God they finally, put me out of my misery with the ending, or so I thought. But now the motherfucker back, the whole series is back. They making a sequel somehow. Like, they brought Lelouch back in a movie. I'm like, okay, cool, fine, whatever. Let's move on. They was like, psych, bitch, you thought for I think the 15th anniversary, they like, we bringing back Code Geass as a series. I'm like, no, the story was told. We wrapped it up. Let's move the fuck on. But no, nobody can do that anymore because it's easier to make money off of IP that you already made money off of than to create something new. So like that one always sticks in my craw. I'll never really fully be over it because the writing will always be just a little too shit. And sometimes it feels like it's shit on purpose, like it's meant to be bad. Like the whole point of it is to be a little bad and be a little silly and over the top. But that don't make it no better. Like, I'm sorry, like if you bad for like a purpose, that still makes you bad. And then I guess the last anime that nobody here has seen, but really gets under my skin, is this anime. It's a sequel to another anime. It's called Kitty Girl and It's the sequel to Kitty Grade. I used to love Kitty Grade. Kitty Grade is this show from like 2002. It's like this science fiction series about these two girls that work for the Galactic Organization of Trade and Tariff. I think is the name of the organization. And like they would go on these missions, and like there was a really cool part. Hey, there are my girls. That's what's up.
I had to look this up myself. What'd you call it?
The sequel is called Kitty Girl and. The original is called Kitty Grade.
And I was actually looking to get that.
The sequel.
And now that you're going to tell me this,
don't get the sequel. It's ass. So like, I won't spoil too much of it since Will actually has the series and he might try to watch it. So like, at least we got proof that somebody's trying to watch it. So I'll give you that one. But like, the first 5 episodes are very fan servicey. Like it's very case of the week. They get sent on these cases to deal with certain things for the GOTT. And like they solve the cases and they do it in a very fan servicey way. There's always like a not fan service, but like they're always wearing like these special these cute costumes or whatever, and it can feel a little tropey. But then as they move past the first 5 episodes, they kind of break out and there's this like massive intergalactic conspiracy theory. There's discussions on like class warfare. There's like ideas like they get into the nature of immortality and like all these cool science fiction themes and like social commentary themes and shit. And it's a really fascinating watch that like by the end of the series I was in love with the characters, in love with the universe, and all I wanted was like a sequel to give me more of this of that universe.
Okay, so I see that this was a Gonzo. This was a Gonzo anime. Huh?
It was indeed a Gonzo production.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Right. Yeah, well,
and it had a lot of like, it had a lot of really great talent like behind it. And I don't know what the fuck happened because that same talent turned around and made Kitty Girl and they took all the goofy shit about Kitty Grade, like all the fan servicey elements, all the parody, over the top comedy type shit, the gags bullshit, and they like stretched that out over the course of the entire fucking series with a brand new cast, so you're not even attached to the cast anymore. And I was like, well, man, what the hell is this? Like, I have been waiting. Like, I watched the anime, I think in 03. When it first came out, like I borrowed it from a cousin. He had it on DVD, so I like watched the whole anime. Was addicted. It became a favorite of mine. And so like I heard like rumors of a sequel. I'm like, yeah, let's go. I'm finna get a sequel to a fire anime. A psych bitch, you thought you're not finna get no sequel that's worth watching. They brought out the sequel, and it's just this comedy nonsense that I didn't ask for. Like they took all the cool plot, like because to me, once you do your genre shift, you stuck in that new genre. You can't just go back and do a whole bunch of comedy shit after you went from comedy into serious stuff, unless you Gintama. But like that, this ain't Gintama, and also Gintama was just one series that really Gintama is a comedy with random serious arcs, not like, oh, it's a comedy until it gets serious and then it stays serious, which is what Kitty Grade was. This was like, oh, it's a comedy, and then it's like, oh, it's actually a serious show. Like this is, I don't get it. Like I don't understand why they tore that show down like that to make something that I guess was supposed to be more like appealing to like a wider audience, to like, you know, the hardcore otaku audience in Japan. Maybe they would it would appeal to them more. Maybe it'd make them buy some Blu-rays more. Maybe it'd make them buy some fucking figurines or whatever the fuck, sell some more merch. But whatever they did, they ruined it. They ruined any chance of that franchise being a franchise because like there are no more sequels. I don't even think there's any like spin-off mangas or spin-off light novels. Like that shit, I think it stopped with Kitty Girl and it's just like the biggest, most annoying disappointment. Like outside of Code Geass, that's the one thing that I was like, man, what series could disappoint? Like when I saw that one, I felt my blood pressure rise a little bit, and I was like, all right, yeah, that's the one, that's the choice right there. So, does anybody have any other ones that they thought about while we were talking? Rakeem, what's up?
Wait, while we were talking, I cannot believe I didn't mention this. God of High School.
Yeah.
For context, for listeners out there, God of High School was a Crunchyroll original. Crunchyroll had made a partnership with Webtoons, which is the Korean manga or manhwa as they call it in Korea, website or app that people use as very popular, extremely popular. Webtoons are extremely popular now, and this is one of that era they were trying to bring in more Korean webtoons onto Crunchyroll and make animes out of them. This was a really big deal in the context of basically taking, you know, another graphic novel type, media and transporting it to animation. If it had worked very well, it would have exploded. Unfortunately for God of High School, it did not work. And personally, why I'm bringing this up is because I read God of High School for several chapters. I'm not quite finished with it. It's so far so many chapters. It's almost a One Piece of manhwa. It's so freaking long. But but I went through the first three major arcs, which was like 360 chapters. So I was well versed in this freaking manga. I was hyped as hell for this anime because what made God of High School special was the intricacy of the fight scenes and the battle. It's a battle manga, and it's a competition type manga between like high school students in certain areas. It's like a karate tournament type thing. Initially, you think that's what it is, like a karate tournament type thing between high school students. The best person wins, and then it starts off like you're locally in Korea because the main character is Korean, Mori Jin, and then as each arc goes by, it's like Korea local, Korea national, then international. Then like they have representatives from every country on earth in one tournament, and the games will change. It's not always 1-on-1. Sometimes like a battle royale and things like that. And there's some supernatural elements into that too. Later you find out that the God part of God of High School is also very apt for the story. But what disappointed me about this anime was that they just did not respect the source material. I think they took the element that we need to go balls to the wall action, cut out all the middle and stuff like that. And what they lost was the pacing was crap. They lost the pacing of the story. They lost some of the background of the story. Characters that were like impactful to those arcs barely even show up or barely are talked about at all. And it changes the tone of the scene. It changes, like the feeling you have towards those characters. If you have messed up pacing to an anime or messed up like storyboarding and you don't understand what's going on, it doesn't matter how cool the action scenes are. I mean, people have this concept that like when you watch a shonen anime, you watch a battle anime, that it's all about fight. That's BS. If you don't care about the characters in that fight, it doesn't matter how nice that fight is. You're like, oh, that's a nice fight. But Jojo, I don't know who that was. I don't know
then
why
it's just a YouTube clip. Like if you don't care about the fight, it's just a YouTube clip.
Exactly. So like for those of us who watch, I know me, Sage, I know me, Sage, and Terrence watched it. The season of God of High School. The pacing, people were asking me so many questions because they didn't know what the fuck was going on. I was like, to be honest with you, I watched all this and they cut out so much stuff. I don't know what's going on either. The parts of the story I can tell you about, they're not there. And I think that was reverberated throughout the anime community. I mean, RDC World even made it part of their anime house skit. It was like, we don't know your story, what the hell was going on. And that kind of was a great example of how like that casual fan was confused about what was going on in the story and really just not speeding up the parts of the manga that they represented and like skimming through those arcs so fast. If they had actually paced it out well, really it should have just been the first tournament. You could have done the first tournament as one season, and that final fight really needed more than one episode. I guarantee that shit. I'm still mad about that. That's one of my favorite fights in the entire fucking manga is that fight between him and his friend. I'm still pissed off about that. But anyway,
they made so many changes. They made so many changes to that like the early parts of that story. I stopped watching that show like about 5 episodes in, like right after the tournament, because they set the tournament up differently. Like I remember in the manhwa, like it's literally like the main character is on the losing end of the fight for most of the fight. But the anime was like, no. We got to make him a stereotypical anime protagonist where he's winning the entire time and the other guy doesn't stand a chance. And it's like, oh, why did you... Like, it's little things like that make shonen anime worth watching at this point. Like, you have to nail certain parts of the execution because we've seen so many of the tropes so many times before. And having a protagonist enter a fight that he cannot win and it feels like he can't win the fight is such a novel idea. We don't get to see that very often anymore. And so to have the protagonist go from, he doesn't stand a chance to, what do you mean he doesn't? Like the only guy, like he can't lose this fight. Like every other protagonist in shonen anime, it's kind of exhausting and it definitely weakened that story. Anybody else got one more that they might have thought of while we were talking?
I got one, maybe.
What's up?
I might get a little, tiny bit of under fire from the old slice of life people, but Usagi Drop was one. Now, this is not the shit on the show per se, because the show did a very good job. Very wholesome. The basic premise is This guy finds out his grandfather died, and he goes and visits.
Oh, that show.
Meets
Okay.
all the,
Sorry, go ahead.
yeah. He goes to visit his family and whatnot, but the other parents and people there, they were talking about a kid that his grandfather had, and everybody was kind of confused on the kid, including our main character. And then he sees this kid is a 6-year-old girl that is basically his grandfather's illegitimate daughter, and basically it leads from him having to take care of this child and basically being like, oh, this is new to him. So he's been used to living on his own. Now he has a kid to take care of. So it's teaching him how to be a parent. I enjoyed that. Where my problem came in at is like what Terrence said with a lot of shows. It ended at a point where you had to pick up the manga. And I was going to do that, but I never got around to it when I finished the show. It took a couple years later for some people to talk about this show again because it came up randomly as a topic. And they explained how it went. He continued his journey parenting. They split off, and she does her life. He lives his life. They come back together, but for some reason, apparently at the end of this, I think it's insinuated that these two get together as a couple at that point.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just sitting there like, oh God.
There's a trope for that. I can't think of what the trope is at the moment, but yeah, it does that.
And I'm sitting here like, how you go from raising this child to, well, I don't really want to say that, but you get what I'm saying.
Yeah.
How you go from one end of the spectrum to come all the way back around to something else? And that threw me for a loop. So I was just like, I guess I can't read the manga now. I'd rather keep it where I know it ended at, because that's where the show ended. He was still raising this child. He was learning to be a father instead of trying to be something else.
Man, went into some Woody Allen type shit.
There is a trope. There is literally a trope for it, but I cannot think of what it's actually called. But yeah, they did go down. I never watched the anime, but I know of what happened. So yeah, that is really wild.
Yeah, like the anime is really sweet, really wholesome. It's literally like watching a beginner parent, and it's like I enjoyed that. But it's just when I heard about the manga and how that went, I'm just like, yeah, it's a good thing y'all didn't go that far in anime, because I'd have been pissed at y'all. I would have definitely had to have thrown a brick through your window for that.
Oh my God. Yeah, I mean, that's the type of shit that like really turns you off, and like sometimes it is best if like we leave off rather than continue, and then like you don't get to see how the manga or like the light novel might have ruined the story. All right, that's gonna wrap it up for this week's episode. If you enjoyed this episode, I need a couple of things out of you. I need you to do us a favor and hit that subscription button on YouTube. I need you to follow us on Twitter and TikTok. I need you to tell your friends about us. And I need you to do me a personal favor and have an excellent week. Peace.